Good morning, everybody. A very warm welcome to you all, and thank you for joining us. My name is Michelle de Klerk, and I'm the founder of the Women's Chapter, which is a platform that really champions and advocates the success of women in business, and particularly women-led business. So it is a great honor to have two phenomenal women with us today. We have Holly Tucker, who holds an MBE for her services to small business and business in the UK. Who was the founder or co-founder of Not on the High Street and is the current founder of Holly & Co., which is an amazing platform which supports small businesses. So Holly, it's a great honor to have you here with us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
We have Mette Marie Kennedy from Collyer Bristow. Mette Marie is a IP specialist, and I'm really thrilled to have you here with us today, Mette, because you and I have had lots of prelim chats to this, so I know what you have in store for everyone and how important this information is to share with our community. But also I know that you have a particular passion for the creative sphere of IP, which is obviously really relevant here, because I think many of the businesses in the room do have creative products and services, but many of us are startups and could really benefit from what you can share with us today. So thank you so much, both of you.
Thank you for having me as well.
We are here today to talk about how to protect your brand as your business grows. And just a nod to Collyer Bristow as well for supporting this series of events where we've been working together to create content for small businesses and solo entrepreneurs to really get more informed and to boost their knowledge around how to protect their businesses. Collyer Bristow particularly has been really helpful to me in the growth of the Women's Chapter, and they have a real entrepreneurial approach, which I think many of you will agree that when you're working with professional services, you really value that when they understand the position that you're coming from. So a very big thank you to the Collyer Bristow team, you, Mette, and all of the other solicitors we've been working with through this program. So thank you. Right, without further ado, I'm going to kick off. We are going to be taking questions, so if you've got questions, pop them in the chat. Also, feel free to share your handles, your social media handles with each other. So I'll share the chat with everyone afterwards so that you can connect with each other and support one another, and we can keep building the size of this community. But we're going to be talking about how to protect our businesses. But before we start, both Holly and Mette, I'd like you to just give us kind of a snapshot of your business journeys, really. Holly, can we start with you? You've had the most phenomenal career, from high-flying advertising exec to co-founder of Not on the High Street to now the founder of Holly & Co. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey and what's really kind of fueled your passion?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. It's lovely to see all your faces. I can see everybody. So good morning. My advertising executive, I think, might be pushing it. I started work at 17. I got my A-levels on the same day I got my first job in advertising, just after the 80s. So I celebrated my 18th birthday in the office, and I've worked ever since. I'm turning 44 next week. And it has been a bit of a ride. My nickname was Holly Hurricane when I was younger, and pretty much that sums me up. I am getting older, so I'm slightly slowing down, but I do slightly jump out of bed. I've got a lot of energy for life, and very much feel grateful for every day that I have. And I think that's how I've lived my life. So starting young, as I said, in advertising and publishing and all these sorts of things, getting divorced at 23 or something crazy like that, unfortunately a brain tumor, all these sorts of things happened to me, but it led to a life where ultimately I feel small businesses saved me. I discovered that I wanted to support them. I did that start with a company I set up called Your Local Fair back in 2002, where I just put together great small businesses under the town hall roof. And that very quickly then, I realized I wasn't going to make my fortune in town halls and trestle tables. So I developed with my co-founder Sophie Not on the High Street back in 2006. Actually, 2005 was when I was sitting around literally the kitchen table with my 3-month-old son Harry, and built Not on the High Street. 16 years on, I definitely, my son's turned 16 just recently, and it's quite amazing to have a business and a human at the same age, to see Do you know what I mean? Like, actually, they think they know it all, but they're still tripping up and making mistakes. They still need their business mum and their mum. And actually now that's led me to develop Holly & Co, because I had this bird's eye view of incredible small businesses. I must have become, over my time of 20 years, 10,000 businesses. And it's what I do. If I'm on a beach in the middle of Africa, not in the middle of Africa, funny enough, on the, on a beach in Africa, I will find someone who wants to start a business and end up mentoring them as we, put on our suntan lotion. It's my absolute joy. And Holly & Co has been built over the last 4 years because I felt that there was no home for small businesses. Imagine a home where you've got your mum standing in the doorway, ready to give you a cuddle and saying, come on in, I'm going to now be part of your journey forevermore. I'm going to make this journey as exciting as possible. I'm going to try and demystify it. And by the way, I'm going to live till I'm 90 and I'm going to be doing this till I'm 90. And I think that was really missing. So I've built a landscape now where, if you literally imagine it a landscape, Mr. Cadbury really inspired me. And I've almost done that in the modern sense. So I haven't built schools, although I'd love to, all these sorts of things. I've now built a podcast. I've built a shop. I have an Instagram. I'm just launching a book. We have, events in churches. So I'm sort of building this landscape. And ultimately, what really drives me, I suppose, in all of this is passion. Absolute, total, undeniably passion. From the second I wake up to the moment I go to sleep, I'm on it. And I interviewed Sir John Hegarty, who actually is an amazing advertising man for my podcast. And he said something that, basically someone who runs a business should be utterly enthused by their idea. And then when you looked up what actually enthusiasm came from, it was a Greek word, enthusiasmus. Sorry about that, don't ever quote me, meaning possessed by God and inspired. And people who are obsessed and energized and enthused are basically magnetic. And it's one of the things that I talk to all my small businesses about. You attract, if you believe in luck, you attract opportunities. He also says, do interesting things and interesting things will happen to you. And that, I suppose, is my common golden thread in my journey, is a complete passion for what I do. I hope that answers the question.
No, it does. Absolutely. Thank you, Holly. And the passion, really, it's literally shines out of you. So it's wonderful.
It's the truth. That's the thing.
And I think, so many people, even just from a personal brand perspective, they underestimate the power of their passion. And that really, as a face of your business, when people connect with you and meet with you, they want to support you and use the power of their purse to put behind your business because of that passion, because they want to be a part of your journey. And I think so many small businesses and entrepreneurs underestimate the power of that. So thank you. You articulated that so beautifully. Thank you. We obviously are here to talk about the nuts and bolts of businesses, because obviously we can't make businesses succeed on passion alone. And that's often when we need to surround ourselves with good people who know the things we don't know. Mette, perhaps you can answer this. Why is understanding intellectual property so important for businesses, regardless of their size?
I think, thank you for the introduction. IP is one of those things where it's classic, when someone asks you what you do for a living and you say, well, I'm an intellectual property lawyer, and they kind of look at you really blankly. And then you start saying things like copyright, trademarks, patents, and people tend to sort of recognize those things more. And I think this is kind of indicative of people's approach to IP as a whole. The thing about intellectual property is that essentially it's incentivizing creativity, because it's a way of protecting new technologies, new brands, new ideas. It rewards your investment in designing and creativeness, and that's something to very much be applauded. But it also has this kind of the business side as well. And it really helps you transform your innovation and your time and effort and your passion into something that has market value, that will help you grow your business, essentially, at the end of the day. It makes you more competitive. It makes you more distinctive. It gives you longevity. And it gives you ownership of your business concept, something that you poured your heart and soul into. It helps you, keep control of that, decide where it's going, stopping other people from infringing on your rights. And then ultimately, when you get a bit further down the line, it can be used as a tremendous asset. It really is appealing to investors to see that you've taken steps to protect what it is that you say is distinctive and innovative about your business. And it'll help you secure investment and grow market value as a company.
And in your experience, is this something that business owners tend to do retrospectively, or only when they find themselves in trouble?
I mean, that can happen a lot. Yeah, it is very easy to kind of put it on the back burner, I think, particularly if you're looking at things like sort of registered rights. I think people concentrate, justifiably on the product and growing the ability to provide the goods or services they want to sell. And often it's a bit of an afterthought about, oh, okay, just noticed that someone else is doing something quite similar, maybe we should try and stop them doing that. And I mean, it's not always too late to do that, but sometimes it's unhelpful that it's been such an afterthought. And actually by kind of taking steps at the very start to start thinking about how you can protect it prospectively, you can save yourself a lot of time and effort.
Thank you. Holly, is this something that you see in your community where possibly, and I don't know if this is kind of something that you've seen a lot of, but I've certainly seen it in our community, where people they're onto an amazing product or service or idea, but they still very much have that kitchen table approach, and they don't think that their business is worthy of possibly, following any legal routes or protocols or registering things. Is that something that you've seen in your community, where people possibly aren't playing as big as they should do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's be real. When you're starting up, it's lots of startups are happy accidents. You do know what I mean? It's a passion, and it just turns into something. And someone at the school gates goes, you know what, you should sell that, and then you do. And then sometimes it can get really, really busy, and then you're on to the next thing. And actually, the excitement of building your business is more exciting than dealing with your P&L and legals and all of that sort of thing. Mette, no offense at all.
No, I love that I'm being set up as the anti-passion here.
No, not at all, because I am, if I could, the amount of businesses, let's think about that stat about, how everyone says 1 in 3 businesses fail, that this stat that your naysayers will say, won't they? Why is that? And actually, one of the things I'm a huge advocate in is get your foundations right, because what I have seen over the last 20 years is that almost think of it as scaffolding. Another analogy that I like is think of it as the roots of your business and your brand. So many people, Not on the High Street was created, I actually think, and weathered so many storms, I can't tell you, because we had these deep set roots. We built our business properly, even though we didn't know what we were doing, don't get me wrong. We actually did do things properly. We had contracts, we had our copyrights, we owned, we made sure our terms and conditions were always up to date. We had a P&L from the start. We had a financial director from the start, which was my dad, by the way, because he was free. And he was qualified, don't get me wrong. So the point is that I can't stress enough how, even though it can be the less exciting part of your business, long term, you will absolutely thank your younger self. And it's something that if you think of it as sort of the yin and yang, or the two sides of the coin of your business, you have to have one to support the other. And it's just fundamental. And just lately I was dealing with, she won't mind me saying it, someone called Faye from the Annual Store. And she found that she woke up one morning, she does these amazing T-shirts called Homeschooled, but schooled was spelt in this clever way. Beautiful T-shirts. She found that this company called Noisy May, which was a design studio, had copied her T-shirts, and then actually George and then Asda and New Look had all taken them on. Now, she was literally, I spoke to her that morning, and I speak to businesses all the time about this. Joe Touch and Sharp from Scamp and Dude, was copied by George and Asda as well. this is so emotional when it happens. You know, she wrote a post about the fact that, you know, she feeds her children through her company. You know, this is her life. And when this happened, she did not know where to turn. She was all over the place, and not in a sort of silly way, but in a, what do I do? These are giants who are up against me. And it's really real. And one of the things that I've spoken to people subsequently, and by the way, it's fewer rather than the majority, unfortunately. This other woman said, yeah, I did register my designs for as little as £50 a time. And she said, do you think I should do every design? And I'd literally come off the week before campaigning for Annual Store, which, by the way, ended up in the Daily Mail Pane of Shame. I ended up getting Asda to take it all down for Annual Store and connecting her, and now she's protected. But, you know, the community went up against the giant. And I, you know, this other woman was saying, I've protected things as little as £50. Should I continue? And I said, absolutely. Isn't it lovely to know that you are protected, that you can go out into the great world? And I'm sure, Mette, you'll talk about, you know, actually, you never normally have to even go past that point of threatening. You know, if someone is copying you, threatening. Actually, because you have done something about it, so normally what I've experienced, Mette, I don't know if you agree, a letter from you to them to say, guess what? You are doing something naughty here. You need to stop. I don't know. For me, lots of times that's worked for small businesses, but at least they've been able to say that they have something.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Actually, you know, something crazy high percentage of disputes settle way before litigation, and often, I mean, especially in the age of social media, the kind of reputational consequences of
yes,
David versus Goliath aspect.
Yeah, and that's
kind of
exactly what happens here.
Is really helpful as well. But certainly, it's super useful to be able to say, "Look at this registration. I took steps to protect myself. I'm taking this seriously, and I did it right from the word go." And if you have a community of like-minded business people around you, then that's so much the better as well.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's what's so great about organizations like this.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually had, Holly, we had Joe Touch in a Shop do an event with us around about this time last year, actually, to talk about, we were talking about how to future-proof your business. And she shared her story with us, which, you know, and I think it was really inspiring. And to hear you speaking about, you know, the Annual Store as well, those stories about how the power of the community can really help you, because essentially it is tough when you are, you know, a small business and you're up against the giants or the big boys, to really assert the protection that you have. But with other like-minded businesses behind you, you can make a lot of noise and hopefully put pressure on them to stop doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
And it's a shame that it happens in the first place. But I guess, you know, we're working in competitive spaces, and some people don't have the same level of creativity as others. And it's easier often just to rip designs off or forget where you saw them in the first place.
Do you know what, just to add to that, what I consequently found out is that you almost think that, you know, and this is what Faye said, that someone had woken up, that they had been scheming for months to rip her off. Do you know what I mean? And that this was a big conspiracy against her. You know what it was? It was a really, really junior person with tons of pressure on them to create a new design, because unfortunately we live in a world of fast fashion. And actually that junior person had done something, and it had just literally hit, you know, things can go from paper to in store quite quickly without them realizing. And so actually then exactly that, the community hearing Asda and everything like that, it was taken down immediately. They didn't want that. So actually also there is this mindset to realize that a lot of copying, I mean, don't get me started on small, but big on small is actually not done as a trying to take you down or anything like that. It will just simply be something that has slipped through, or a junior or something like that. And hence why I think what you're saying is these things can be solved very, very quickly.
I think we touched on an important point earlier, and that was around budget and this perception that getting legal advice or protecting yourself is something really expensive and out of reach for independent businesses. But Mette, I know that you were saying, and you often tell businesses, there are lots of things that people can do themselves before it even reaches that point that gives them a base level of protection. Could you share some of those points with us?
Yeah, of course. I mean, so you'd be amazed how many people turn up at our doors virtually speaking these days, of course, sort of halfway down the road of launching their business and having invested money in it and so, they come to the point of filing a trademark application. And at that point, they discover that there's someone else out there doing something similar. And one of the things we always say is, well, you know, right from the very, very word go, if you've got an idea, just check on Google, have a look who's out there doing the same thing, using a similar name or selling similar products, because it might just be worth having a rethink of the name that you want. Because if you've invested money in you know, designing packaging, designing branding, possibly filing trademark applications, all that kind of thing, it's such a waste if you then have to find that you're locked out from using that later on. And don't just look in the UK, you know, if you're thinking in 5-10 years you might want to start shipping or delivering or, you know, doing anything else internationally, have a look at the kind of markets that you want to expand into potentially, and see who's doing what there, because it could just be as simple as, you know, redesigning a logo or calling your product something slightly different. But it's definitely worth getting that right from the word go, because it gives you space to grow into as much as anything else. And it also means that you're not treading on anybody else's toes, because you don't want to find that you're kind of stopped from doing things in the future when you get to a point of, you know, your business suddenly launching, taking a step forward, and suddenly you're being prevented from doing that. So yeah, that kind of thing. I mean, there are lots of resources, particularly on sort of things like the government websites, about the different IP rights. You know, work out which ones sit best with your product base, even if you can't afford necessarily to take solicitor's advice at that stage, but work out what you think protects your brand well, from the word go, whether it's, you know, trademarks, designs, copyright, patent rights, all those kind of things. And then also things like, you know, adding a copyright stamp to documents, dating everything, putting your name on stuff, make sure people know what it is and where it's come from. Mark things as confidential. Tell people that the things that you're telling them are confidential in writing and in words when you're speaking to them about your ideas, because the more that you can kind of claim ownership of what's yours, the easier it will be to protect it going forwards.
And that also sets the tone, doesn't it, for, you know,
yeah, it tells people that you're serious.
Yes, exactly. And in terms of the different kinds of IP, I mean, and I know that there are loads of different, and we can't go into that amount of detail now, but can you give us a kind of a snapshot of, you know, what is the difference between the little copyright C and the R and the trademark? I mean, and what would you advise people focus on first? So if they were going to put some budget behind getting something registered, what should they do first?
That's such a tricky question. It really depends on what your product or your service is. What is the core of your business? I mean, I'm going to assume for the purpose of this webinar that patents are less relevant, because I think probably most of the audience here is sort of more in the kind of creative sector, in the sense of sort of the artistic creative sector rather than kind of technology. But patents are there to protect things like inventions, and they're often more expensive to apply for and maintain. So I'll leave that to one side. Copyright is an interesting one because it's automatic. It arises as soon as you put something on paper or record it in any kind of fixed form, and that's free. You don't have to register it. It's yours, and it exists, and it lasts for a really long time. So it's very useful for protecting things like prints, photographs, you know, artistic works, craftsman kind of objects that have been made by hand, all that kind of thing. And then you've got the sort of unregistered side of trademarks and designs, and here it gets slightly more complicated. But so trademarks, if what you got as your product is particularly distinctive, then as Holly was saying, it's probably worth thinking about design protection. So and you can have different types of design protection. There's unregistered protection, which is harder to establish, in that you've got to prove everything's yours and when you made it and where you first started using it, and prove that people have kind of taken part of that. It's much easier if you can get registrations for it, but equally the system kind of recognizes that you might not want to put the outlay of paying to register everything right from the word go. So there's the mechanism whereby the law gives you 12 months from starting to exploit a design, in which you can decide whether you want to invest money in registering it, a sort of grace period, if you will, so that you can see if this product's going to be a success. And it will depend on what kind of products you have, in the sense that if you've got a couple of sort of blockbuster products and those are the key thing that your business relies on, then you might want to think about registering them for longevity, because they're going to be around for a while and they're really worth protecting. Whereas if you have lots of different products and you're changing your stock constantly, it might not necessarily be worth spending the money to register them all. I mean, that's probably something you'd want to talk about with a trademark and design attorney. But things like fashion, sometimes, for example, if you're releasing collections every year and you've got hundreds of pieces coming in and out, you might not have the budget to spend on registering every single design, but you might have certain things that come up in one form or another consistently, and those are your kind of main products, and those are the things you want to invest money in protecting. And then aside from the kind of design rights, which are kind of there to protect sort of 2D and 3-dimensional objects, and the kind of the shape and configuration of objects and the surface decoration, you've got trademarks, and that can be a really useful side of investing in the brand aside from the product. So if you've got I don't know, I'm thinking of someone like Desmond and Dempsey, the kind of luxury pajama company. What makes them distinct from a Marks and Spencer's pair of pajamas? There's probably not a lot in it in terms of quality and manufacturing process, but what most of what you're paying for there is the kind of the brand and the luxury kind of aura that's associated with that, and that kind of justifies that differentiation in price and the kind of the attractiveness of that brand, why you would want to pay that much more to have their products instead. And so the trademark aspect of it, the kind of the brand name, the sense of appeal for that particular company and where it's coming from, that's something that can really escalate value, and also protect you if you want to branch off into different product lines. It can protect you in different markets. Something like a trademark, I mean, now that we've left the EU, it's sort of not quite as simple as it used to be, where you could just get the whole of the EU states for, you know, the roughly kind of not a huge amount more than you would pay just for a national mark in the UK. But it's definitely worth having a conversation with some trademark attorneys about, you know, where you see your business going, getting that protected in the UK, at least right from the word go, if you can. It's not hugely expensive to do. And also certainly, you know, jurisdictions like the EU as well, if you see yourself selling into that as a potential future aspect of your business, trading internationally, then you can carve out this massive domain where you've potentially got this monopoly right to use this and really protect the whole of your brand and identity. So that's probably one of the first things I would think about putting money behind as well.
Thank you.
Oh, actually, sorry, while I'm on the subject, as Holly was saying, you know, think about confidentiality and marking things as confidential and using NDAs and getting your terms and conditions of business right from the word go. I know these are sort of things that are less glamorous sounding because it's just like paperwork and but actually they are so fundamental, and you will thank your lucky stars one day when your client says, oh yeah, but we didn't have a contract, and you can say, haha, actually we did, and it says here that I'm entitled to do this with, you know, in this situation. And it really will save you for an investment of, I don't know, a couple of £1,000s at the beginning, which is, it will seem like a huge output, but it will back you up time and time again in the future. So yeah, get the paperwork right from the word go, and you will thank your lucky stars that you did.
Yeah, I would agree too. I think for service-based businesses as well, in terms of, and
Absolutely.
Holly, it's really inspiring to hear that from the beginning you really put a huge amount of value on those things, because so many businesses don't. And I know some really established ones that have come short because they haven't had proper contracts in place with suppliers.
We're always consistently amazed by who doesn't have any paperwork in place with this kind of thing. It's
or
incredible.
when you let them lapse because they're outdated. And, you know, particularly now in the world that we live in around data protection and making sure that our policies are updated, you know, the onus is on us to make sure that we are compliant. And that we're keeping those policies updated and protecting the people that we engage with and the data that we store. So, Holly, I wondered, because I know that you know, through the Not on the High Street platform, you made, I think it was in excess of 200 of those businesses, or it enabled those businesses to become multi-million-pound turnover businesses. Do you think that having or protecting their IP, or them having some awareness of that, was a part of their success?
I think so. I mean, actually, that number it's more like 1,000 now, actually.
Oh, wow.
So 1,000 million pound businesses, which is just incredible. And last year we cumulatively hit the £1 billion mark that we had pumped into the UK economy, which I'm super, super proud of. And if you think that's just through 5,000 small businesses did that. I think, yes. I think just generally, though, if I'm, you know, I actually look at we tend to, and I do this day in, day out, 15 hours a day. I speak to small businesses and have done just forever. And one of the things that I feel is that getting all of this sorted is a real feminist act. You know, it's one of those things that, you know, why is it that women, for instance, are, you know, with small businesses, female-run small businesses pump in £85 billion a year into the economy, and that's an old stat. When you look at the fact that the missing gap of, if we started businesses at the rate of men, parity between startups, you know, female and male, we would pump £250 billion into the economy in 4 years. You know, actually, this whole idea where, yeah, it isn't great and it isn't, you know, what we necessarily love doing, the sort of administration side, the finance side, all these things. But if we are going to change things, do you know what I mean? Like, if we are actually going to stand together and do something incredible, then we do have to put these foundations in place. And I think that, and I'm making a sweeping statement, but is it that our male counterparts love all of this, right? And they do it with, you know, that is what they want to do. They do put the finances in place. They're not, you know, they're not scared about going for investment. You know, they fake it the whole way, whereas us women look for permission, don't we? We have to be experts before we do anything. And I just think that the change will come when we actually do put those foundations in place. We don't allow our businesses to go out of business. We make sure we stand up to the fact that we aren't brilliant, let's say, at finances. The amount of 40-year-old women that tell me I was no good at maths, and yet they're 40. And I'm like, okay, great. So at 13, you weren't great at math. I reckon you're okay. Do you know what I mean? You can do it now. And it's the same when it comes to legals. It's the same when it comes to finance. It's the same when it comes to going for investment. And so I think, yes, that when I look back at these not on the high street businesses, if I compare them to the other ones that, do you know what I mean, weren't doing as much, the common denominator, well, there'll be there'll be loads of common denominators in this group, but one of them will be that they've really got their SHIT together when it came down to finances, protection, administration, the operation of their business. And then plus they've been able to do the yin and yang, have an amazing operation with these foundations, plus incredible product or service, you know, and they've made it work together. So yeah, I do think so, but I think it's almost even more than just legals. It's just the whole suite of things that I really want to encourage us women to do, because as I think we've all said, you know, you really will count your lucky stars. You know, it can literally take down your business, you know, being caught out on a copyright, having a competitor that has more budget than you and you never protected yourself from the starting point, not having enough cash, not going for that cheap loan that you could go and get and excel your business to the next stage. You know, these are the things that I think that we need to try and master and try and get rid of that imposter syndrome. Just because you don't understand it, who cares? You've got people like Mette who's going to teach you what to do. Do you know what I mean? Like, we don't need to be our own experts. And I think that's the difference between men and women.
I would agree, Holly. You know, we're very fortunate to have Laura Morgan as an active member of our community as well. And she is always talking about this, you know, demystify the financial jargon, get yourself educated, spend some time on Google, make a list of all the things that you don't know, and make a concerted effort to find out the answers, ask people to help you, and you know, really invest in your business that way, because it builds your confidence ultimately, which gives you a platform, as you were talking about, that solid foundation or the infrastructure for your business to really drive your passion in a meaningful way, and where you can do that with, you know, in a future-proofed way. Because you are protected. And I totally agree. And I've written pieces for the Telegraph about this as well, about women having this lack of confidence around those elements of their business. And they perceive themselves as being the ideas person or the creative mind of a business, but all of the other stuff gets left to somebody else. And the reality of that is often we don't have the budget for somebody else, or we take bad advice, or we just go with our gut on things without actually making educated decisions. So I think, I was going to ask you the question about what advice you would give to somebody starting their business journey. But would I be right in assuming that's the advice, is to kind of get your SHIT together?
Yeah, I think so. I think that it is one of the most important things, and it's something that I've just seen consistently. I was Alison Rose from NatWest was talking about, the number one thing that they had in the report, the Rose report, was that women still feel the imposter syndrome, and that is what's holding us back. And actually, I did some really interesting work with a psychologist lately. And, what is the imposter syndrome? We love to label ourselves with it, but actually, what is it? And can you get yourself out of it? And actually, the imposter syndrome is, the layers between knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know. It's not like we're not in some sort of Stephen Hawking sort of string theory universe where it's actually one version of Holly is here and there's just this other version of Holly and I'm going to be found out. It's literally the in-between. It's the sandwich filling between what you know and what you don't know. And so one of the things that I do say to people starting out, or just that advice, is stop talking about the imposter syndrome. Stop talking about what you that somehow that you didn't swallow the business Bible, when you started a business. And what if you just reframed it and just said, that's something I don't know a lot about, but I can't wait to find out more. Or actually, I've hired an accountant for an hour, not to do anything, but I'm just literally going to list all the words I don't understand. And no one else will ever hear this, right? And he's just going to explain it to me, or she's going to explain it to me. And then I'm going to hire them again for an hour, and we're going to set up a simple P&L. And he's going to literally do, the dummies guides. He's going to do a dummies guide on this, and I can do this with no one else knowing about it. Is that thing about reframing from saying, I've got the imposter syndrome, and imposter is in, you're not meant to be there in the first place. How ridiculous, this is your company. Syndrome feels like you've got something medically wrong with you. The fact that women are the majority of people who feel this, it's like, change the way that we even talk about it. You just don't know it today, and you will. And also, life and business would be super boring if you were a know-it-all, which, by the way, I've met many of those, and their businesses don't necessarily go according to plan. And actually take it on as, your business is a journey without destination unless you're selling it. But if you are what I call good life business, a good life business being that you value taking the kids to school, you value being able to afford that holiday, you value the fact you might retire in your company, then this is just a journey of self-discovery and learning and building whilst making a great income and living your fullest creative self. So actually, that's the sort of advice that I would give someone starting out.
Thank you, Holly. That's amazing. And, I think that idea that we should recognize our worth regardless of what our turnover is or what the ultimate end game is, because I think there are so many, and I think particularly women who start businesses, they build businesses around their families in order to be able to put food on the table, but also to have the flexibility to spend time with their children or have other passions and hobbies. And a lot of those women, I think, and some of the bank reports, I believe, are responsible for this, make those women feel like their businesses are less worthy because they're not on a fundraising path, or they're not on, ultimately wanting to exit as multimillionaires, and that actually all of those businesses and those journeys carry value and have worth. And when we start to believe that, it also, is an incentive to start looking at all the legal aspects and making sure that our foundations are in place, because we're protecting our livelihoods essentially. So thank you for that. That's really inspiring. I wondered if we could just touch on one more point before we open up for some questions. Mette, you had raised something which I think is really interesting. How do we deal with IP when you have a co-founder? Who owns it?
Yes, this can be quite an interesting question, because it's a super awkward conversation potentially to have at a point in time where you're just setting off and you're getting on well and everything's working nicely, but sort of without wanting to rain on anyone's parade, you just see it time and time again that there's a falling out later on the line. It's difficult to work out who owns what, or it's all registered in one person's name and maybe it should have been owned by the company instead. and then someone is shut out from using. I mean, this came up the other day, you know, and two people set up a company, they're applying for all sorts of grants, they have a falling out, and then suddenly they're trying to work out what they can each take away from that, because ultimately there is going to be value. Even if the business doesn't go forward, there's going to be value in the work that you've done. But if you're not sure what's yours and what's theirs, what can you do about it? So it is, again, it goes back to this planning and the foundations and all the points that Holly was making earlier. Give yourself the kind of confidence of a platform that you can point to say, okay, this is where we are. We all know what the status quo is. We know who owns what. And even if it doesn't work out at the end of the day, this is the arrangement we've come to. And when there's more than one of you, I mean, so even if there is just one of you, it's probably still worth having a thought about whether IP should be legally owned in your name or the company's name. And there are a whole raft of different tax and legal reasons why you might want to do that, and think about those issues depending on, again, what your business is, where you're exploiting your rights, etc. And if there's more than one of you, trying to decide, again, whether it's better to have things kind of in common ownership within the company, and then how you deal with that on a kind of corporate level. And again, I mean, this is an issue that's probably worth talking to some commercial and corporate lawyers about, because there are other kind of issues associated with that. But it you know, it just gives you the confidence that, I don't know, say something awful happens to one of you, you all know where the IP lives, and that can still be used by the company at the end of the day. Or there's a horrible falling out, one of you departs, at least the IP is still there. And yes, there might be a process by which someone needs to take value out of the company in order to leave, but at least you're left with the right to keep going at the end of the day, and you're not shut out from using something that's essential to your business. So yeah, have those conversations on a sunny day when you're both, you know, favorable to each other, rather than trying to work it out after there's been a horrible event or a dispute about something, or, you know, and someone might die and it ends up being in the hands of their wife, and suddenly you're running a business with someone that you don't know because they happen to own half the rights. But it's very much worth getting advice on and thinking about at an early stage, just so that you can kind of plan for the worst, in the same way that you might want to think about sort of key man insurance as your business grows, or any of those other kind of issues. You know, what happens if you get ill, and the same, you know, it's always worth planning ahead. And obviously no one saw COVID coming. Well, most of us didn't anyway, but it just goes to show how you need to think about your business would still be able to work in difficult circumstances, and this is one of those issues that is definitely worth thinking about early on.
Thank you. That's amazing. I was going to ask some of the questions we've had, but I see we've got Patrick Wheeler from Collyer Bristow in the chat answering everyone's legal questions, which is amazing. So thank you so much for that, Patrick. Which means that I have time to ask Holly my question. And this is of personal interest to me, but we always ask our amazing panelists this question. And I think everyone would really love to know how you navigate challenge, because you make it look so easy. But do you have kind of, you know, I guess the question is, what's in your toolkit for how you navigate challenge or difficult situations?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I relish them, if I'm honest with you, and maybe I'm being brought up on them. You know, I think back to my 27-year-old self, and do you know what I mean? That actually, I'm not the same person as I was then, and now I have a very optimistic, sunny disposition, as in I'm always feel that everything that's put in, I'm soulful as a business person. I do believe that everything that's put in front of us is there to teach us something, to work a muscle that we haven't worked, to become a better business person, you know, from firing your first person to building a team, to dealing with copyright issues, to running out of money. I did 5 times at Not on the High Street, to raising, do you know what I mean? All these things, they're sent to you. The business journey is not for the faint-hearted anyway, and you all know that already. You wouldn't be on it if you thought it was a walk in the park. But actually, that is the way I get through these situations, is having that absolute vision that I will get absolutely through this, that I will be a better person for it. And I always then, and I also do try and I am an empathetic leader. I try and listen more than I speak, and actually get through it and maybe take some of the ego knocks, that maybe some lessons that are there for me, as much as actually getting through something where maybe it's not the ego that needs to take a knock, it's actually you need to step up and be a leader. Or it could be that you actually now need to go and learn an entirely new area of business that you never did know. And whatever it is, I know that I visualize getting through it. I have an absolute, determination. There's no stopping me. There's no sort of like, this will wobble my company. I've run out of money. Okay, that's fine. So I'll get some more. It's not that the company will finish. So I think that is a thing that I have trained my mind to do, and it's really been really, really helpful. And I think about, I just think about lots of things that I do. And it's just that determination and visualization of the other side, but also knowing that I'll be a stronger leader and businesswoman for it.
Thank you. That's amazing. You spoke as well, and I think since this event is a nod to International Women's Day, which I don't really personally believe there should be a day we should, hopefully one day we won't need an International Women's Day. But since it's a nod to that, if you had a magic wand that you could wave, whether that be at institutional level or government level for women in business, what problem would you solve for them?
I would solve, oh gosh, there's a frigging heap of them, isn't there? I don't believe in International Women's Day necessarily either. It is something that for Holly & Co, I've committed the next 40 years is one of my 4 missions to dealing with, which is to help women succeed in business and grow companies. I actually think one of the things that I think is going to be beneficial coming out of COVID is something that I was very keen on, which is the ability for flexible working. If you think Not on the High Street was almost started and grown because it's 90% female, and my community at Holly & Co, which I write daily on my Instagram, we have 100,000 in there. The point is before, working from home used to be done like this, wasn't it? It was sort of like this sort of seen as, yes, she's just working on home on a Friday, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I mean, archaic. And actually through COVID, I think what's going to be incredibly beneficial is that is changing. So 2 weeks into COVID, I made Holly & Co, even though I just spent a freaking fortune on our offices, I made it a working from home company. Instantly I did that. And I was, as a founder, you're completely, aren't you, absolutely paranoid and also slightly obsessed in perfectionism. And, and so you're a bit control freaky. And I had to deal with that. And actually I let the 20 people that we had go into the world of home working. And it was the best thing that I've ever done ever. And I think all companies, not all, I'm sorry, ones that I know of have had a phenomenal experience with that. And so I think that this is going to be incredible for women working with families, growing their businesses. Do you know what I mean? It's going to be, it was not sustainable doing the mummy juggle, right? The running to the tube, trying to get the kids into childminders, running back. Then your tube was delayed, breaking your neck, getting to, and everyone thinking that you'd left work early at 5:30. It just wasn't sustainable. So that's something that I'm going to be very grateful for.
Thank you. That's amazing. And on that point as well, because I think every year when we get to International Women's Day, there's this explosion on social media about the merits of calling yourself a female founder. And I would love to know your thoughts on that, because the argument against it is that it pays into this gender disparity in business and that we're discrediting ourselves in some way or another by calling ourselves female founders. What are your thoughts on that?
For now, I've got an entire product range at Holly & Co called Female Founders. So I'm pretty pro it. I've got an amazing black t-shirt with neon pink writing that says Female Founders. I feel that we have not ever reached a situation where it's a little bit like International Women's Day. I don't want it, but I know it probably should be there. I don't necessarily want to be calling people female founders, but right now in the situation that we are in, if we live 29,000 days on this planet and I've got something like 13,500 days left, I pretty much know in those 13,500 days, this subject, although it will get better, it will not be solved in my lifetime. So I feel like there's place, isn't there, in our history to hone in on something and say, right, you know, you don't believe you can do it. A woman starting a business, you know, as we talked about today, so many people don't believe that they can do it. I'd like to be able to shine a light on the women who do it, and so that they can sing proud about it. Because if they can see role models, if they can see more women doing it, then potentially we're going to help other women go after their dreams.
Thank you. That's amazing, and I couldn't agree more, because I think we really there is a shortage of female role models for young people, and if anything, I mean, from a personal perspective, I want my daughters to see that their career opportunities that exist for them are endless, and that you really can, if you have the passion, you can build a business out of something that you love, and you can create a mechanism that feeds your family and supports you from a livelihood perspective, provided you are given the inspiration. So definitely, yeah. I think hopefully one day that won't be the case. Maybe when they're grown up, or I don't know. They say the forecast is at least 100 years, isn't it? So.
But also, can I just mention on that, and I'm going to do an unashamedly book plug, but even though this is not my book, this is something a small business made for me. Look, it's Stitch. Wow. Isn't that unbelievable? And this comes out in May, and it's called Do What You Love, Love What You Do, because actually that's the whole point. You know, women for so long have looked at running a business with the mummy guilt. You know, I missed Harry's first steps. I missed his first words, all these sorts of things. He's now 16. He has his own business. I recorded my 100th podcast in which he was on, called Conversations of Inspiration. And I'd never, funny enough, asked him the question about what he felt about my guilt that I felt. And he just turned around to me and he said, but if you were a man, you wouldn't be feeling that. How come you felt that? And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe for 16 years I've never asked you that question. The point is that we are raising, as women running businesses, we are doing what the education system's not doing. We are teaching our young firsthand, you know, what a woman is, a businesswoman is, but also entrepreneurism in the home. And that is what's lacking in their education. And so one of my chapters is basically, I mean, this is just my whole book is about redefining a new way of doing business, the soulful way of doing business, a very female way of doing business, and how incredible it is. But one of the things is that we've got to get rid of the guilt, because ultimately it is about fueling our children with entrepreneurial spirit. And in the freelance economy and what they're going to grow up in, they're not being taught it at school, so we better be doing it at home. So almost get rid of the guilt and almost be empowered that you are now not only homeschooling again, don't get me wrong, we don't want to be doing that again, but we are still teachers in a way. And so, yeah, and so that's one of the things that I write about in the book, is another reason why I feel like we're held down, is because we just put so much on ourselves. But as my son said, but no man would ever have felt that, worried about not coming to the sports day. And I thought, oh gosh, yeah, I wish I'd asked you maybe 14 years before this.
Thank you so much, Holly. Yeah, I totally agree. And I must apologize, because if you can hear my dog barking, he's going nuts. There's somebody at the door. So being on me, this is one of the joys of working from home, is that our children and dogs encroach upon our business life. But I wanted to, Mette, actually, we've had Daryl in the chat's has asked if we can please ask you this question just before we end off, actually. Okay. And it's about understanding, and you know, it might benefit the designers that are reading in the chat, the issues with trademarking your actual name. And I know a lot of women do this. They establish eponymous brands, and there are challenges associated with that, obviously, either when you sell or you exit, that you know, what do you do? Do you have any advice around that particular issue?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the famous cases of things like Karen Millen and Jo Malone, and I mean, famous in the sense that there have kind of been negative aspects of it. Obviously, they did very well using their own name for a very long time, but then I suppose that the downside is that in the future, if you sell your business or it's taken over by somebody else, what happens to that name, and can you continue to use it in a sort of similar field? And the odds are the person who's buying your business probably doesn't want you to continue using that, and then what are you left with? And it can be quite tricky to navigate. I mean, I know that I guess there's sort of cases like the sort of Jimmy Choo, and where someone's come back in afterwards and sort of retaken ownership of it, and then there are obviously kind of famous examples of people who refuse to do that, like Sarah Burton, Alexander McQueen, and Tom Ford, who kind of, his part of his deal with Gucci, I think, was that stuff wouldn't go out under his own name during the time he was there, on the basis that he would want to use it afterwards and therefore should be free to do so. So he kind of kept the two very separate. And I guess using your own name is really nice, and then it kind of keeps things personal, and it puts you at the forefront of everything. But I guess it's probably also worth having a thought about sort of further on in the future, as your business grows, are you going to be happy still being so intricately connected with it, or do you see yourself kind of going off and starting something else afterwards? You have an exit strategy, and does that involve leaving your name behind? Because obviously there are big emotional strings there that you may want to be able to continue to use, and you wouldn't, it would feel, I think, very sort of disenfranchising having to leave your name behind in that sense. So yeah, something very much worth thinking about. And there are other ways that you can kind of incorporate your name into businesses, or make it personal to you, but potentially trademarking your actual name might not be such a good idea in the long term. So yeah, think about it.
Brilliant, thank you. And now I'm aware that we've come to the end, and Holly, I know you need to go in 2 minutes. So I just wanted to say my thank yous to both of you for joining us today and sharing so much of yourselves and your journey and your knowledge. It's been phenomenal. Holly, I will be sharing the link with everyone, the link to your book with everyone in the follow-up, as well as the notes that you've prepared for us, Mette, on the sort of on the IP aspects. But yeah, I know your book is available for pre-order, and it's out on the 6th of May. Is that right, Holly?
Yes. And being a dyslexic, this has been like a massive thing for me. You know, Penguin came along and asked me to redefine sort of the business book, which is unbelievable that they would ask a dyslexic to do that. And so a lot during lockdown, and I've been writing it, and it has just been an amazing experience, and one I'm really proud of, and I hope that to write many more. And so yeah, so it is available for pre-order and out May the 9th, and fingers and toes crossed, people like it.
Was muted. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. I'll be in touch with a follow-up email and obviously a recording for this. But again, a massive thank you, Holly and Mette, for making time to be with us today. I'm eternally grateful. And to Collyer Bristow for making this series of events possible. I wish you an amazing day and week, everybody. And we'll be in touch soon. Thank you very much. Cheers, everyone.
Bye-bye. Take care. Bye-bye. See you.